The sharp crack of Commander Trevor Vance's laughter echoed through the Naval Special Warfare Command logistics warehouse like a whip against concrete. It was 0730 hours on a Tuesday morning in Coronado, California, and Rebecca Harlow had just watched her metal clipboard clatter to the floor, knocked from her hands by the same man now doubled over in amusement. She was 36 years old, 5'5", 138 pounds, wearing khaki contractor pants and a navy blue polo shirt with a faded logistics company logo. Her dark auburn hair was pulled into a tight bun. A 3-inch scar traced her left jawline, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Vance straightened up, wiping his eyes. 6'1", 195 pounds, blonde hair going gray at the temples. His uniform was pressed sharp enough to cut paper, and an expensive Breitling watch caught the fluorescent lights as he gestured toward the scattered inventory sheets. Jesus Christ, Harlow, can't even hold onto a clipboard. How the hell did you pass the background check for this place? Behind him stood Lieutenant Jake Morrison and Petty Officer First Class Derek Hutchins. Morrison was 29, 5'11", muscular, with dark brown hair and a cocky smile that never quite reached his eyes. Hutchins kept his head shaved, hazel eyes darting between Vance and Beck's like he was waiting for permission to join in. The warehouse had become crowded fast. What started as a routine quarterly inspection had drawn 40-plus personnel. SEALs in training gear, administrative staff, instructors between classes. At least a dozen phones were already out, recording. Bex bent down slowly, picking up the clipboard and the scattered papers. Her movements were controlled, efficient, no wasted motion. "My apologies, Commander," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, flat, professional. Vance stepped closer, boots stopping inches from her hand as she reached for the last inventory sheet. "You know what your problem is, Harlow? You logistics types think you understand what we do here. You count bullets and protein bars and think that makes you part of the mission." He picked up an MRE case from the nearest pallet, tossed it from hand to hand. "But you've never been downrange, never heard rounds crack past your head, never had to make a decision that actually mattered." Morrison laughed, nudging Hutchins. "Commander's got a point. What's your call sign, mop lady, paper pusher, box stacker?" The crowd was growing. Someone whistled. Another SEAL called out, "Go easy on her, LT. She might file a complaint." More laughter. Beck stood, clipboard held at her side. She didn't respond, didn't defend herself, just met Vance's eyes for exactly 2 seconds, then returned her attention to the manifest in front of her. From the glass-walled office 30 feet away, Master Chief Petty Officer Raymond Kowalski watched through the window. He was 48 years old, 5'10", 205 pounds of old-school SEAL muscle, gray crew cut, weathered face that had seen 3 decades of naval service. His father had been a Gulf War SEAL, and Kowalski had inherited both the career and the instinct for reading people. Something about Harlow's posture bothered him. The way she held that clipboard. Firm knuckles, elbows at efficient angles, tucked close to her body. Weight distributed evenly on both feet, despite the slight limp she carried. That wasn't how civilians stood. That was a ready stance. Vance grabbed another MRE, this time dropping it deliberately near Bex's feet. "Oops, better pick that up. Wouldn't want the warehouse getting messy." Hutchins snickered. Morrison checked his phone, still recording. Bex crouched down, picked up the MRE, and placed it back on the pallet. Her right hand moved with particular care, and for just a moment her sleeve rode up. Kowalski caught a glimpse of scarring on her forearm. Not the kind you got from an accident, the kind that came from fire. High-temperature burns, patterned in a way that spoke of proximity to an explosion. "You know what I think?" Vance continued, playing to his audience now. "I think we've gotten soft, letting contractors run logistics for special operations. Back when I came up, we handled our own supply chains, knew every round, every piece of gear, didn't trust it to some. Commander, Kowalski's voice cut through the warehouse as he stepped out of the office. "Sir, might I have a word?" Vance turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Master Chief, just conducting an inspection." "Understood, sir, but we've got the quarterly ammunition audit scheduled for 800. Need to brief you on the discrepancies before we start." It wasn't true. The audit was next week, but Kowalski had learned long ago when to interrupt. Vance glanced at his watch, then back at Bex. "We'll continue this later, Harlow. Try not to act anything before I get back." He strode toward the office, Morrison and Hutchins following. The crowd began to disperse, though phones were still out, people rewatching footage and laughing. Bex returned to her inventory count. Row C, pallet 14. MREs, case count 47. She marked it on her sheet with a pen that moved in small, precise strokes. A young corporal, Amy Reeves, 23 years old, 5'6", blonde hair in a regulation bun, approached hesitantly. She was Marine liaison, third-generation military, and her father had taught her to recognize injustice when she saw it. "Ma'am, that wasn't right, what Commander Vance did." Bex didn't look up from her counting. "It's fine, Corporal." "It's not fine. That was harassment. You could—" "I said it's fine." Bex's tone didn't change, but something in it made Reeves step back. Not anger, something colder. The sound of a door closing. Reeves nodded slowly and walked away. In the office, Kowalski watched Vance settle into the chair behind the desk. Morrison leaned against the filing cabinet. Hutchins stood by the door. "Master Chief, I don't appreciate being interrupted during inspections," Vance said. "Understood, sir, but I wanted to mention Ms. Harlow's security file. Have you reviewed it recently?" Vance waved a hand dismissively. "Standard ONI background check. Secret clearance, civilian contractor. What about it?" "Just thought you might want to verify her employment history. There are some gaps." "Kowalski, I've got 200 personnel on this base and a senator's aide visiting next week for a capability demonstration. I don't have time to babysit every contractor's resume. If ONI cleared her, she's cleared. Dismissed." Kowalski held his gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded. "Aye, sir." He left the office and returned to the warehouse floor. Bex was still counting, still marking her sheet. The slight limp was more visible now as she moved between pallets. Her right leg carried the weight differently than her left. Shrapnel, Kowalski thought, or maybe a fracture that never healed right. He'd seen that walk before, on operators who'd been too close to an IED. Bex finished her count on row C and moved to row D. Behind her, 3 junior SEALs walked past, still laughing about the clipboard incident. One of them made a comment about civilian incompetence. Another suggested she'd probably complained to HR. She never looked up, never acknowledged them, just kept counting. Kowalski pulled out his phone and opened the base personnel database, typed in Rebecca Harlow's name. The file came up. Hired 13 months ago, logistics coordinator, secret clearance, previous employment listed as various government contract positions. But when he clicked on the detailed background, half the page was redacted. Employment history from 2009 to 2019. Blank sections with TS/CI markers. 10 years of nothing. He scrolled down. Education, redacted. Previous addresses, redacted. Emergency contact, redacted. That wasn't normal for a secret clearance civilian contractor. Kowalski looked back through the office window. Vance was on his phone, laughing about something. Morrison had left. Hutchins was scrolling through the video he'd recorded. None of them had any idea what they'd just done. 2 days later, at 1400 hours, Lieutenant Morrison walked into the warehouse with 3 junior SEALs trailing behind him. Petty Officer Hutchins was there too, carrying a clipboard of his own, a deliberate mockery that made the younger guys snicker. Bex was on the loading dock, verifying a shipment of ammunition crates against the manifest. The afternoon sun cut through the open bay door, throwing long shadows across the concrete. "Harlow," Morrison called out, "need you to verify some inventory for us." She looked up from her work. Morrison had positioned himself between her and the exit. The 3 junior SEALs, none older than 24, formed a loose semicircle. Not quite threatening, but not casual either. "What items, Lieutenant?" she asked. "All of them." Hutchins grinned, gesturing at the 40-plus pallets stacked throughout the warehouse. One of the junior SEALs, a kid named Patterson, no relation, laughed. "Yeah, wouldn't want any mistakes, not with important stuff like crayons and toilet paper." Beck set down her pen. The inventory was completed yesterday and filed with Supply Command. If Commander Vance requires a recount, he can submit a formal request through. Hutchins stepped forward and swept his arm across the nearest supply cart. Boxes of admin supplies, cleaning materials, and small parts scattered across the dock. A heavy toolbox hit the concrete with a metal clang that echoed through the warehouse. "Oops," Hutchins said. "Clumsy me. Better clean that up." The junior SEALs were all recording now. Morrison leaned against a pallet stack, arms crossed, watching. Bex looked at the mess for 3 seconds. Then she knelt down and started picking up the scattered items. Her movements were methodical, controlled. She didn't hurry. "You know what I don't get," Morrison said, addressing his audience more than Bex, "is how someone who can't even keep a cart stable is supposed to handle critical supply chain operations for special warfare units. Right?" Hutchins kicked a box of pens, sending it skittering across the dock. "Makes you wonder what the hiring standards are these days." Bex continued cleaning. She'd collected about half the items when Hutchins reached for a heavy ammunition canister, 30 pounds of linked 7.62 rounds in a metal container. He lifted it with both hands. "Hey, Harlow, heads up." He threw it. Not directly at her head, but close enough. A civilian would have flinched, ducked, maybe screamed. The canister arced through the air, spinning slightly, coming in fast from her left side. Bex's left hand shot up without her even turning her head. She caught the canister at the handle, absorbed the momentum with a smooth motion that brought it down to her side, then set it on the ground next to her. The whole movement took less than a second. The dock went silent. Patterson's phone was still recording. You could see it in the frame. The catch was too clean, too practiced. That wasn't luck. "Nice catch," Morrison said, slowly. His tone had changed. Not quite suspicious yet, but close. "You play softball or something?" Beck stood up, cart now reorganized. "Or something." She pushed the cart toward the storage area. Her limp was barely noticeable, but Hutchins caught it. "What's with the leg?" he called after her. "Old injury?" She didn't answer. Morrison pulled Hutchins aside, voice low but not low enough. "Did you see how she caught that? That's not normal reaction time." "She got lucky." 30-pound canister from 8 feet? Nobody's that lucky. From the glass office, Kowalski was watching again. He'd seen the catch, seen the weight transfer, the controlled placement. That was training. Years of it. Morrison wasn't done. He followed Bex into the main warehouse, the junior SEALs trailing like hungry dogs. "Since you're so good with your hands," Morrison said, "maybe you can help us identify something." He walked to a long black rifle case leaning against the wall, one of the items from today's shipment. The case was unmarked, wrapped in brown shipping paper with nothing but a routing number. "What's in there?" Morrison asked. Bex glanced at it. "I'd need to check the manifest." "No manifest. Classified shipment. But you seem smart. Take a guess." She looked at the case for 5 seconds. MK13 Mod 7, 300 Winchester Magnum, Schmidt & Bender 5-25 56 optic. Effective range 1,300 meters. The warehouse went quiet again. Patterson stopped recording, then started again. "How the hell do you know that?" Morrison's voice had an edge now. "The case is sealed." "Dimensions," Beck said simply. "Length, weight distribution, routing codes." Hutchins laughed, but it sounded forced. "Anyone can read codes." "There are no codes visible," Beck said. "Shipments classified. But the case dimensions match MK13 specifications. Weight suggests the full kit with optic and suppressor. Routing number indicates NSWC Crane, which only handles specific weapon systems for DevGru and—" She stopped. Morrison stepped closer. Dev grew in what? How do you know where that routing comes from? I process a lot of shipments, Lieutenant. You pick up patterns. Patterns? Morrison pulled out his phone. Master Chief? Kowalski? Yeah, it's Morrison. Can you come down to the warehouse? Got a situation. 3 minutes later, Kowalski arrived. Behind him, unexpectedly, was Commander Vance. What's the problem? Vance asked. Morrison pointed at Bex. She just identified a classified weapon system from a sealed case. New specs that aren't in any manual I've seen. Knew the routing origin for DevGru shipments. Vance's expression shifted. Is that true, Harlow? I made an educated guess based on case dimensions and routing information. Routing information that's not visible, Morrison added. Vance walked to the case, examined it. How do you know NSWC crane routing codes? I've processed hundreds of shipments in 13 months, Commander. The codes follow patterns. What patterns? Bex was quiet for a moment. First 4 digits indicate origin facility. Next 3 indicate destination authorization level. Last 6 are item classification markers. Vance stared at her. That's not public information. It's observable information, if you pay attention. Hutchins jumped in. She also caught, "You took a 30-pound ammo can one-handed, without looking. That's not a crime," Beck said. "No," Kowalski said quietly. "But it's interesting." Vance's face was reddening. "Harlow, I'm going to ask you directly. Have you had any military training?" "No, sir." "Any law enforcement background?" "No, sir." "Then how do you explain?" "I'm good at my job, Commander. I observe. I learn. That's all." Vance looked at Morrison, then at Kowalski. "Master Chief, pull her complete background file. I want everything. Education, work history, references. On my desk in 1 hour." "Aye, sir." Vance turned back to Bex. "Until we verify your story, you're restricted to administrative duties only. No access to classified shipments. Clear?" "Clear, Commander." Dismissed. Bex walked toward the office area. The junior SEALs parted to let her through, no longer laughing. Patterson was reviewing his footage, rewinding to the canister catch over and over. Morrison watched her go. "Something's wrong here." "Agreed," Vance said. "Nobody picks up that much specialized knowledge just from counting boxes." Kowalski said nothing, but he was already thinking about those redacted sections in her file. 10 years of blanks. TSSCI markers where there should be mundane employment records. Before we see what happens next, quick question. Have you ever been underestimated at work because of how you looked or what your job title was? Drop your story in the comments below. Now, let's get back to what happened when Commander Vance discovered he'd made a terrible mistake. Bex sat in the small break room, drinking water from a paper cup. Her hands were steady. But if you looked closely, you could see the slight tremor in her right hand, the one with the burn scars hidden under her sleeve. Outside, Kowalski was already on the phone with JSOC Personnel Command. 1 week later, the Naval Special Warfare Command qualification range was packed. It was 0900 hours on a Friday, and Commander Vance had arranged something special, a capabilities demonstration for a congressional visit. Senator Bradford's military aide, a former Army Ranger named Carl Webb, was touring with 12 other VIPs. 60-plus personnel lined the observation area, and another 20 worked the range itself. Bex arrived in a supply truck, delivering ammunition for the qualification chutes. She wore the same khaki pants and polo shirt, her auburn hair in its usual tight bun. She backed the truck to the ammunition point, started unloading the heavy crates with a hand truck. Vance spotted her immediately. He was standing with Webb and the VIP group, explaining the SEAL qualification standards. Morrison and Hutchins flanked him like sentries. "Gentlemen," Vance announced loudly, "let me show you something interesting about modern military logistics." He walked toward Bex, the entire group following. Phones came out. At least 30 people were recording now. "Ms. Harlow," Vance called, "a moment of your time." She set down a crate and turned. "Commander, our guests are interested in combat readiness standards. You've been quite vocal about understanding our operations." His smile was sharp. "Why don't you demonstrate for them?" Webb looked confused. "Demonstrate what?" Miss Harlow claims extensive knowledge of weapon systems. Last week, she identified a classified rifle from a sealed case. New technical specifications most civilians wouldn't recognize. Vance gestured to the range. I thought she might show us her expertise firsthand. Bex said nothing. Morrison stepped forward, carrying an M4A1 carbine. Just basic qualifications, Harlow. Nothing fancy. Unless you'd rather admit you were bluffing about all that knowledge. The crowd was growing. Word spread fast on base. Within 2 minutes, 75-plus people surrounded the range, forming a loose amphitheater. Several junior SEALs were live streaming. Corporal Reeves pushed through the crowd. Sir, if she's a civilian, is this appropriate? The corporal raises a good point, Vance interrupted, his tone mockingly considerate. Miss Harlow, you're under no obligation. But if you've been exaggerating your familiarity with our equipment, now would be the time to say so. Carl Webb frowned. Commander, what exactly is the purpose of this? Accountability, sir. We take operational security seriously. If contractors are claiming knowledge they don't possess, that's an integrity issue. Bex looked at the rifle in Morrison's hands, then at the range. Target distance markers showed 100, 200, 300, and 400 meters. What would you like me to demonstrate, Commander? Vance smiled wider. Surprise us. Morrison handed her the M4A1. But as he did, his thumb was clearly visible on the magazine release. The magazine was seated, but he hadn't chambered around. A setup designed to make her look foolish when she pulled the trigger on an empty chamber. Bex took the rifle. Her grip was immediate and correct. Support hand on the handguard, trigger finger outside the guard, muzzle pointed downrange. The transition took less than a second. Kowalski, watching from 20 feet away, felt his stomach tighten. That wasn't how civilians held rifles. That was textbook combat grip. Bex didn't move toward the firing line yet. She tilted the rifle slightly, eyes on the ejection port. Press-checked the chamber without anyone noticing the movement. Empty, as expected. She performed a tactical reload, smooth, practiced, chambering around with a motion that produced barely any sound. The tap rack was so subtle that half the crowd missed it. Morrison noticed. His smile faded. Target distance? Bex asked. Vance pointed to the 400-meter marker. Let's see what you can do at range. Use the iron sights. Winds running about 15 knots from the east. 400 meters with iron sights and crosswind? Even experienced shooters struggled with this. Carl Webb spoke up. Commander, that's an extremely difficult shot for anyone without extensive training. Then we'll find out if Miss Harlow has that training, won't we? Bex walked to the firing line. The crowd fell silent. Someone's phone camera zoomed in on her face. Completely neutral, no emotion visible. She dropped into prone position in 2.3 seconds. Stock seated in shoulder pocket. Cheek weld perfect. Elbows positioned to create a stable triangle. Left leg canted for recoil management. Kowalski whispered to the Master Chief next to him. That's ISPC positioning. That's not recreational shooting. Bex's breathing changed. 4 seconds of normal breath, then a controlled combat rhythm. Inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 6. Her body went absolutely still. The wind flags showed 15 knots, gusting to 18. At 400 meters, that meant roughly 24 inches of drift. She adjusted her sight picture without using Kentucky windage reference points. 5 rounds, 8.7 seconds. The electronic target system registered immediately. The range officer's voice came over the loudspeaker. Center mass grouping, 4.2-inch spread at 400 meters. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Morrison's face went pale. Carl Webb pulled out his own phone, checking something. Commander, SEAL qualification standard at 400 meters is 12 seconds with an 8-inch grouping. Vance's jaw was tight. She got lucky. Wind conditions. Wind was constant, the range officer interrupted over the speaker. 15 knots, gusting to 18. Shooter compensated perfectly. Hutchins stepped forward, desperate. Anyone can get lucky once. Let's make it interesting. He walked to the equipment table and grabbed an Mk18 CQBR, the shorter, more complex carbine variant used for close-quarters battle. He laid it on the shooting bench, then pulled out a blindfold. Field strip and reassembly, blindfolded. Standard time is 60 seconds. He grinned at the crowd. Let's say 45 to make it fair. Morrison added, if she's really trained, this should be easy. The crowd was silent now. Several SEALs in the audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't just difficult, it was a test most of them would struggle with under pressure. Kowalski started to move forward. Commander, maybe we should. Vance held up a hand. She wanted to demonstrate expertise, Master Chief. Let her demonstrate. Beck stood from the firing line, walked to the bench. She looked at the disassembled Mk18 parts laid out in deliberate disorder. Upper receiver, lower receiver, bolt carrier group, charging handle, buffer spring, trigger assembly, magazine. What rifle? She asked quietly. A hint of something in her voice now. Not quite confidence. Something colder. Morrison pointed. Mk18. Clock starts when you put the blindfold on. Carl Webb spoke up again. Commander Vance, I'm not comfortable with this. If she's injured during... She can refuse, Vance said. Bex accepted the blindfold from Hutchins, tied it herself, double-knotted, stood over the parts table, rolled her shoulders once, cracked her knuckles. The range went absolutely silent. 83 people held their breath. Clock starts now, Morrison said, hitting his stopwatch. Bex's hands moved. Not frantically, with absolute precision. Muscle memory built over thousands of repetitions. Lower receiver first. Trigger assembly seated. Pins aligned. Upper receiver. Barrel nut checked by feel. Gas tube aligned. Bolt carrier group. Bolt lugs rotated into battery. Firing pin secured. Charging handle slid home. Buffer spring in stock. Compressed and locked. Magazine inserted. Press checked. She set the completed rifle down, removed the blindfold. Morrison stared at his stopwatch. 38.2 seconds. ONS. The range officer picked up the Mk18, performed a functions check. Weapon is fully operational. All safeties functional. Perfect assembly. Nobody spoke. You could hear the wind moving across the range, the distant sound of surf from the beach half a mile away. Carl Webb turned to Vance. Commander, what exactly is this woman's background? Vance's face was red. She's a logistics coordinator. That's what her file says. Her file is wrong, Webb said flatly. I've seen that assembly speed once before, from a Delta operator at Fort Bragg. Morrison tried again, voice tight. Let's test tactical knowledge, theory versus practice. He pulled out a tablet, showed Bex a satellite image. Compound scenario. Multiple structures. High-value target, location unknown. How would you approach? Bex studied the image for 15 seconds. Then she spoke, voice level and professional. Primary breach at the southeast corner. Wall height suggests standard reinforced concrete. Two-man charge, 4-second delay. Support element establishes overwatch on the northern roofline for elevated fields of fire. Assault element splits. Alpha team takes the main structure eastern entrance. Bravo clears the courtyard and secondary buildings simultaneously. QRF stages 200 meters west with vehicular support and casualty evacuation capability. She paused. Interior structure suggests a modified T layout based on shadow patterns visible in the image. That means the HVT is most likely in the northwestern room, furthest from entry points, most defensible position. You'd clear counterclockwise to minimize exposure time in the fatal funnel. Morrison's tablet slipped from his hand. Hutchins caught it. Morrison stared at his tablet screen, then back at Bex. How do you know the interior structure? That's not visible in this satellite image. Bex was quiet for 3 seconds. Shadow analysis. Window placement. Structural load distribution visible in the roofline. That's not something you learn from counting supply boxes, Carl Webb said. He turned to Vance. Commander, I'm formally requesting clarification on this individual's security clearance and background. Vance's face was crimson now. Master Chief Kowalski, get her complete file. Everything ONI has. I want it now." Hutchins wasn't finished. He grabbed an SR-25 rifle from the equipment rack. "Fine, let's talk specifications. You seem to know everything else." He held up the rifle. "What can you tell me about this?" Bex glanced at it. Knight's Armament SR-25 EMC, 7.62 NATO. Effective range 800 meters with standard loads, 1,000 plus with match-grade ammunition. That specific variant has the SOPMD enhancement package, modified gas system for suppressor use, reduced decibel signature to approximately 128 at operator ear, free-floating barrel for accuracy improvement of roughly 30% over standard models. The range had gone completely silent. Hutchins lowered the rifle slowly. "That suppressor specification is classified. That modification package isn't in any public documentation." "Then I must have read it somewhere," Vance demanded. "Where exactly did you read classified JSOC modification specifications?" "I don't recall, Commander." Morrison pulled up another image on his tablet, hands shaking slightly. "This compound. Recognize it?" Bex looked. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "No." "You're looking at it for the first time, and your answer is immediate?" "I don't recognize it." "This is from Operation Kayla Mueller, 2019, Syria, Baghdadi raid." Morrison's voice was rising. "The operation that killed ISIS leadership. The interior structure you just described, that modified T layout you mentioned, matches this compound exactly. How do you know that?" "Lucky guess based on standard compound architecture in that region." Carl Webb stepped between them. "Commander Vance, this has gone beyond demonstration. This woman has knowledge she shouldn't possess. I'm recommending immediate security review." Vance grabbed his radio. "Security to qualification range, now." Bex didn't move. She stood with the same calm she'd maintained throughout, hands loose at her sides. But her right hand had a slight tremor now, barely visible unless you were watching closely. Kowalski was watching closely. A young SEAL in the crowd, couldn't have been older than 25, spoke up. "Master Chief, that shooting, that wasn't normal, right?" "No," Kowalski said quietly. "That was Tier 1 level." Morrison heard him. "What did you say?" "I said that shooting was Tier 1 level. DevGru, Delta. That's not recreational shooting. That's combat-tested muscle memory." The crowd started murmuring. Phones were everywhere now. At least 40 people recording from different angles. Bex shifted her weight. 8, slightly, favoring her right leg. The limp was more pronounced when she was tired. Kowalski noticed her reach up unconsciously to adjust her shirt collar, and for just a moment, maybe 2 seconds on the video that Patterson was recording, her sleeve pulled back. Burn scars. Distinctive patterning. The kind that came from close proximity explosive burns, not accidents. And just barely visible at the edge of her collar, the top curve of a tattoo. Gold and black. Kowalski had seen that design before, on the shoulder blades of naval special warfare operators, the Trident. His eyes widened. He pulled out his phone, pulled up the paused video from Patterson's stream, zoomed in on those 2 frames where her sleeve had ridden up. The scar pattern was unmistakable. He'd seen injuries like that once before, on an operator who'd survived an IED strike in Syria. The burns formed a distinctive splash pattern from a vehicle-mounted explosive device. Security arrived, 3 MPs led by a senior chief. Vance pointed at Bex. "Detain her for questioning regarding potential security violations." "On what grounds, Commander?" Bex asked. Her voice was still level, but there was an edge now. "Unauthorized knowledge of classified information, possible espionage." Carl Webb held up a hand. "Commander, let's not make accusations we can't support. What I'm seeing is someone with training. That doesn't make them a spy." "It makes them a liar," Vance shot back. "Her file says civilian contractor, no military background, no law enforcement. But she just demonstrated capabilities that take years of specialized training." Hutchins was scrolling through his phone frantically. "Sir, I'm searching for her name in any military database I can access. Nothing's coming up." Because she's using a false identity, Vance said. Or because her records are sealed, Kowalski said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. What did you say, Master Chief? Vance demanded. I said her records might be sealed, sir. When I pulled her file last week like you ordered, half of it was redacted. TS/SCI compartmented access markers. Employment history from 2009 to 2019 completely blank. 10 years? Webb's expression changed. 10 years of redacted employment with top-secret markers? Yes, sir. Vance grabbed Kowalski's arm. Why didn't you tell me this immediately? I tried to, sir. You said you didn't have time to babysit contractor resumes. The implication hung in the air. Vance had been warned. He'd ignored it. Morrison stepped closer to Bex, his phone out, recording her face. Who are you, really? Rebecca Harlow, logistics coordinator. That's what my badge says. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm authorized to give. Authorized by who? Bex said nothing. Corporal Reeves pushed through the crowd. Commander, my father served in Iraq in 2007. He was with a SEAL team doing direct action operations in Ramadi. He told me stories about... She stopped, looking at Bex. He said the best operators were the ones who didn't need to prove anything. They just did the job. Corporal, that's not relevant, Vance snapped. Maybe it is, sir. Reeves' voice was shaking but determined. My father said he served with someone once who could field strip an M4 in 30 seconds blindfolded. He said that person saved his life 3 times in one deployment. He said that person didn't look like what people expected operators to look like. Bex met Reeves' eyes for just a moment. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or respect. The senior chief MP approached Vance. Sir, what are your orders? I want her. A black SUV pulled up to the range entrance, tires crunching on gravel. The passenger door opened, and Rear Admiral Patricia Keene stepped out. She was 54 years old, 5'7", with salt and pepper short hair and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. 2-star shoulder boards caught the morning sun. The entire range snapped to attention. Keene walked directly to Vance. Commander, explain why there are 80-plus personnel gathered at a qualification range during a scheduled congressional visit. Vance stammered. Ma'am, we were conducting a demonstration. I can see that. Her eyes moved to Bex, standing in the center of the crowd like the eye of a storm. Then to the rifles on the bench, the target displaying impossible accuracy at 400 meters, the blindfold still sitting next to the perfectly assembled Mk-18. Who is this? Keene asked. Rebecca Harlow, Admiral, civilian logistics contractor. She's been making you look incompetent? Keene's tone was ice. Master Chief Kowalski, brief me, 60 seconds. Kowalski stepped forward. Ma'am, Miss Harlow demonstrated expert-level marksmanship, field strip capabilities under pressure, and tactical knowledge consistent with special operations training. Her personnel file contains 10 years of redacted employment history with TS/SCI markers. Commander Vance requested security intervention on suspicion of unauthorized classified knowledge. Keene pulled out her phone, made a call, walked 20 feet away, spoke for 3 minutes in a voice too low to hear. The range stayed frozen. Nobody moved. Vance was sweating despite the cool morning air. Morrison had put his phone away. Hutchins stared at the ground. Carl Webb stood next to Bex. Ma'am, for what it's worth, that was some of the finest shooting I've seen in 15 years. Thank you, Bex said quietly. Where did you serve? I didn't say I served. You didn't have to. Keene returned. Her expression was unreadable. Commander Vance, Master Chief Kowalski, Corporal Reeves, and Mr. Webb. You 4 with me. Everyone else returned to duties immediately. And I want every phone that recorded this turned over to security within the hour. That's not a request. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. Junior SEALs pocketed their phones with visible disappointment. Patterson looked back 3 times before finally walking away. Within 5 minutes, the range was empty except for the 5 people Admiral Keene had ordered to stay, plus Bex and the 3 MPs. Keene pointed to the covered observation pavilion 30 feet from the firing line. "Everyone, over there, now." They walked in silence. Vance kept glancing at Bex like she might disappear if he looked away. Morrison's jaw was tight. Hutchins had gone pale. Under the pavilion, Keene turned to the senior chief MP. "Establish a perimeter. Nobody gets within 50 feet. That includes officers." "Aye, ma'am." The MPs moved to positions around the pavilion. Keene waited until they were out of earshot, then fixed her attention on Vance. "Commander, tell me exactly what happened here." Vance straightened. "Ma'am, over the past 2 weeks, Miss Harlow has demonstrated knowledge and capabilities inconsistent with her stated background as a civilian logistics contractor. She identified classified weapon systems, new routing codes for compartmented shipments, and just now demonstrated marksmanship and tactical knowledge at special operations level. So you decided to publicly humiliate her in front of 80 witnesses and a congressional aide?" "I decided to verify her claims, Admiral." "By forcing her to perform like a trained animal?" Keene's voice was cold. "Master Chief, is that an accurate characterization?" Kowalski hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. "Yes, ma'am, that's accurate." Vance's face reddened. "Admiral, with respect, this woman represents a potential security breach. Her file contains—" "I know what her file contains, Commander. I just spent 3 minutes on the phone with JSOC Personnel Command." Keene pulled out a tablet, unlocked it. "Miss Harlow's background check shows standard secret clearance issued 13 months ago through ONI. Civilian employment history going back to 2019. Before that," she looked up, 10 years of redacted information with TS-SCI compartmented access markers." Carl Webb leaned forward. "Admiral, what kind of civilian employment requires that level of classification?" "The kind that isn't civilian." The pavilion went silent. Keene turned to Bex. "Miss Harlow, I'm going to ask you a direct question under authority of UCMJ Article 107, which applies to all personnel on this installation regardless of status. You are required to answer truthfully or face charges of making false official statements. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Have you ever served in the United States Armed Forces in any capacity?" Bex met her eyes. "Yes, ma'am, I have." Vance made a sound like he'd been punched. Morrison took a step back. Hutchins actually sat down on the bench behind him. "In what branch?" Keene asked. "United States Navy, ma'am." "What rank?" Bex was quiet for 5 seconds. "I'm not authorized to disclose that information without proper clearance verification and need-to-know establishment." Vance exploded. "That's not an answer, Admiral. She's being evasive." "Commander, be quiet." Keene didn't raise her voice, but Vance went silent immediately. "Miss Harlow, I'm going to make this very simple. I have the authority to verify your status. But before I make that call, I need to know if disclosing your background poses any operational security risks to ongoing missions." "No, ma'am. I'm not operational. Haven't been since 2019. Since the year your employment history goes blank in your civilian file." "Yes, ma'am." Carl Webb was taking notes on his phone. "Admiral, I need to report this to Senator Bradford's office. If there's been a security breach—" "There's been no breach, Mr. Webb. Just a series of catastrophically poor decisions by Vance leadership." She glared at Vance. "What there has been is a failure to properly verify contractor credentials before making wild accusations." She pulled out her encrypted phone again. "I'm calling JSOC Personnel Command. I'm going to ask them to verify your identity and service record. Once I do that, your cover as a civilian contractor is over. Do you understand that?" Bex nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you consent to this disclosure?" "I don't think I have much choice at this point, Admiral." "There's always a choice. I can shut this down right now, classify everything that happened here, and you can go back to your warehouse. But these questions won't stop. Commander Vance will keep pushing. Eventually, something will break." Bex looked out at the range, at the target 400 meters away, still displaying her shot grouping. at the Mk-18 on the bench, assembled perfectly in 38 seconds while blindfolded. "Make the call, ma'am." Keene dialed, put the phone on speaker. It rang twice before a gruff male voice answered. "JSOC Personnel Command, Colonel Marks." "Colonel, this is Rear Admiral Patricia Keene, Naval Special Warfare Command, Coronado. Authentication code Victor 7 Charlie 92. Authenticated, Admiral. How can I help you? I need immediate verification on an individual, Rebecca Jane Harlow. Social security number." She looked at Bex. Bex recited the number from memory. There was typing on the other end. 10 seconds of silence. Then, "Admiral, that's a restricted file. I need to verify your clearance level and need to know. Clearance is TS/SCI. Need to know is based on potential security breach investigation at my command." More typing. 20 seconds this time. "Admiral, I'm showing this is unusual. I need to escalate this call. Can you hold for 2 minutes? Affirmative. The line went to hold music. Classical. Mozart, maybe. It felt absurd under the circumstances. Vance whispered to Morrison, "What the hell is going on?" Morrison didn't answer. He was staring at Bex like he'd never seen her before. Corporal Reeves stood at attention, tears forming in her eyes. She'd figured it out already. Kowalski could see it in her face. The hold music cut off. A new voice came on the line, older, with the kind of authority that came from decades of command. "Admiral Keene, this is General Holland, JSOC Operations Command." Keene's eyebrows rose. A 3-star general personally taking a personnel verification call? That never happened. "General, I have Rebecca Harlow here at Coronado. I need verification of her service record. Is she safe?" Strange first question. "Yes, sir. She's in protective custody pending investigation." Investigation for what? Unauthorized disclosure of classified information. General Holland laughed, actually laughed. "Admiral, you're investigating her for knowing classified information? That's rich." "Sir, her file shows civilian contractor status, but she's demonstrated capabilities that suggest she's exactly who her service record says she is." "Admiral, I'm authorizing full disclosure under Operational Security Exception 4-7. Is this line secure?" "Yes, sir. Encrypted communication." "Is Commander Harlow present?" "Commander?" Vance's face went white. "Yes, sir," Bex said quietly. "I'm here, General." "Bex, been a while. How's the leg?" "Manageable, sir." "Glad to hear it. Admiral Keene, I'm sending Commander Harlow's complete service jacket to your tablet now. It's going to be heavily redacted, but you'll get enough to understand the situation. What I can tell you over the phone is this. Commander Rebecca Harlow served 10 years in Naval Special Warfare, the last 6 attached to DevGru as an intelligence and operations officer. She holds the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor, and 3 Purple Hearts. She was medically retired in 2020 at full rank after extensive rehabilitation from injuries sustained during Operation Sandstone in 2019. The pavilion was absolutely silent, except for the wind moving through the palm trees. Keene's tablet chimed. She opened the file, started reading. Her expression changed from skeptical to shock to something like awe. "Sweet Jesus," she whispered. "Commander Harlow chose to live quietly after discharge," General Holland continued. "She took a civilian logistics position to stay connected to the community without being operational. That was her right. And now I understand someone decided to publicly humiliate her?" Vance looked like he might be sick. "Yes, sir," Keene said. "That's an accurate assessment." "Who?" Keene looked at Vance. "Commander Trevor Vance, executive officer of this installation." "Commander Vance, are you there?" Vance's voice cracked. "Yes, sir." "Did you verify Commander Harlow's background before?"
"Before accusing her of security violations? Her file showed civilian contractor status, sir. Her cover file, the one designed to protect her privacy. Did you contact JSOC to verify? Did you check for restricted access markers? Did you do any of the basic due diligence required before accusing a decorated combat veteran of being a spy?" Silence. I'll take that as a no. Admiral Keene, I'm recommending Commander Vance be relieved of duties pending investigation under Article 92 for failure to follow established security verification protocols. Understood, General. And, Admiral, tell Commander Harlow that Admiral Patterson would be proud. She's honoring his memory the right way. Bex's composure cracked for the first time. Just a flicker. Her jaw tightened, eyes glistening. "Thank you, sir," she said, voice barely above a whisper. The call ended. Admiral Keene set her phone down carefully, like it might explode. She looked at Bex for a long moment, then stood at attention and rendered a full salute. "It's an honor, Commander Harlow." Bex returned the salute, muscle memory taking over. Her posture changed, straighter, more formal. Years of bearing returning in an instant. Master Chief Kowalski immediately came to attention and saluted. Corporal Reeves followed, tears streaming down her face now. Morrison and Hutchins scrambled to salute, 3 seconds too late. Their hands shook. Vance just stood there, frozen. Keene held the salute for 5 full seconds before dropping her hand. "At ease, everyone." She turned to Carl Webb. "Mr. Webb, what you've witnessed here is classified. I'll need you to sign non-disclosure documentation before you leave this installation." "Understood, Admiral." Webb was staring at Bex with something like reverence. "Ma'am, I served with the 75th Ranger Regiment, did 2 deployments in Afghanistan. That shooting, I've only seen that level of precision a handful of times in my entire career." "Thank you," Bex said quietly. Keene gestured to the bench. "Sit, all of you." They sat. Bex remained standing until Keene looked at her. "That includes you, Commander." "Yes, ma'am." Keene pulled up the service record on her tablet. "I'm going to read portions of this aloud because I think everyone here needs to understand exactly what they've done." She looked at Vance. "Especially you." She began reading. "Commander Rebecca Jane Harlow, commissioned through Naval ROTC in 2009 at age 21. Graduated Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL Training in 2011, Class 289. Served with SEAL Team 3 for 2 years before selection to Naval Special Warfare Development Group in 2013. Morrison made a choking sound. DevGru, Tier 1, the unit that killed bin Laden. Deployed 7 times between 2013 and 2019. Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia. Intelligence and Operations Officer specializing in high-value target identification and direct action planning. Keene looked up. She wasn't just attached to DevGru, she was embedded in assault teams. She went through the door. Kowalski leaned forward. "Ma'am, I served in Ramadi in 2007. The file mentions Admiral Patterson. Is that?" "Admiral William Patterson, yes." Keene's voice softened. He was Commander Harlow's commanding officer for 6 years. According to this record, he personally recommended her for early promotion to lieutenant commander in 2017. Bex was staring at her hands. The tremor in her right hand was more visible now. "Service awards," Keene continued. "Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Valor Device, 3 awards. Bronze Star with Valor, 2 awards. Silver Star for Valor Under Fire during Operation Sandstone, 2019. She paused. 3 Purple Hearts. First awarded in 2015 for shrapnel wounds sustained during combat operations in Yemen. Second in 2017 for gunshot wound to right leg during direct action in Mosul. That explained the limp. Hutchins looked at Bex's leg like he was seeing it for the first time. Third Purple Heart, awarded in 2019 for injuries sustained during Operation Sandstone in Syria. Keene read silently for a moment, her expression darkening. The citation is heavily redacted, but what I can read says Commander Harlow was part of a 12-person team conducting a high-value target extraction. The team was ambushed, IED strike followed by coordinated small arms fire. The pavilion was silent except for the distant sound of waves. Commander Harlow sustained 3rd-degree burns to her right arm and torso, plus shrapnel wounds to her face and chest. She was medically evacuated after. Keene stopped reading. looked at Bax. After providing covering fire that allowed 4 teammates to reach the extraction point, Corporal Reeves was openly sobbing now. Morrison had his head in his hands. Admiral Patterson and 5 other personnel were killed in action.
During that operation, Keene said, Commander Harlow spent 7 months at Walter Reed Medical Center. She was offered return to operational status in 2020. She declined and took medical retirement at full rank and honors. Keene set down the tablet. So to summarize, Commander Vance, the woman you publicly humiliated, the woman you accused of being a spy, is a decorated combat veteran with 10 years of special operations experience, 3 Purple Hearts, and a Silver Star. She served under one of the finest officers the Navy has ever produced, and she was there when he died. Vance's voice was barely audible. I didn't know. You didn't verify. That's worse. Kowalski spoke up. Ma'am, permission to speak freely? Granted. I tried to tell Commander Vance about the redacted sections in her file 8 days ago. He said he didn't have time to check on contractor resumes. Keene closed her eyes briefly. Commander Vance, you are hereby relieved of duties as executive officer, effective immediately. You will report to my office at 800 tomorrow to face formal charges under Article 92, failure to follow regulations, and Article 133, conduct unbecoming an officer. You're dismissed. Admiral, please. Dismissed, Commander. That's an order. Vance stood, swaying slightly. He looked at Bex, opened his mouth, closed it, then walked away, shoulders slumped. Morrison and Hutchins remained seated, looking like they wanted to disappear into the concrete. Keene turned her attention to them. Lieutenant Morrison, Petty Officer Hutchins, what you two did goes beyond disrespect. You physically intimidated a senior officer. You threw objects at her. You deliberately attempted to embarrass her. Ma'am, we didn't know. Morrison started. You didn't need to know her rank to know that behavior was wrong. Keene's voice was steel. Master Chief, what's the penalty for throwing a 30-pound object at an officer? Article 89, ma'am. Disrespect toward a superior commissioned officer. Maximum penalty, dishonorable discharge and 5 years confinement. Hutchins went white. Morrison looked like he might pass out. I'm not going to pursue charges, Beck said quietly. Permission to speak, Admiral? Keene looked surprised. Granted, they made a mistake, a serious one. But they're young, and they were following bad leadership. She looked at Morrison and Hutchins. General Patterson used to say something. Everyone gets one catastrophically stupid moment in their career. What matters is what you learn from it. Morrison's voice cracked. Ma'am, I don't deserve. No, you don't. But you're going to earn it back. You're going to spend the next year learning what it means to respect people, regardless of what uniform they wear or what job they do. Clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. Bex turned to Hutchins. And you are going to stop following people just because they have rank. Build your own character. Don't borrow someone else's. Hutchins nodded, unable to speak. Keene stood. Lieutenant Morrison, Petty Officer Hutchins, you're both on notice. One more incident, anything remotely resembling this, and I'll throw the book at you. Dismissed. They left quickly. Only Keene, Kowalski, Reeves, Webb, and Bex remained. Master Chief, Keene said, get word out. I want everyone who recorded video today to turn over their phones to security within 2 hours. All footage is to be classified and scrubbed under OPSEC protocols. Aye, ma'am. Corporal Reeves, why are you crying? Reeves wiped her eyes. Ma'am, my father served in Ramadi in 2007 with Admiral Patterson, back when he was Commander Patterson. He always said Admiral Patterson was the finest officer he ever served under. And when the Admiral died in 2019, my father cried for the first time in my life. She looked at Bex. He told me Admiral Patterson died protecting his team, that he drew enemy fire so others could escape. I always wondered who survived that day, who he died saving. Bex's voice was hoarse. 4 of us made it out. I was one of them. Thank you, Reeves whispered, for staying, for keeping his memory alive. I'm not keeping his memory alive, Corporal. I'm trying to live up to it. Carl Webb spoke for the first time in minutes. Commander Harlow, I need to ask, why logistics? You could be running training programs, consulting on tactics, teaching at the War College. Why count boxes in a warehouse? Bex looked out at the range again. Because every manifest I check, I remember loading trucks in Syria. Every ammunition count reminds me of calling for resupply that came 3 minutes too late. Admiral Patterson died because our quick reaction force didn't have enough AT-4 launchers. Logistics failure. Her voice hardened. So I make sure that doesn't happen here. I make sure every SEAL, every Marine, every operator who goes downrange has exactly what they need. That's how I honor them. That's how I honor him. The wind picked up, carrying the salt smell from the ocean. Keene was quiet for a long moment. Commander Harlow, I'm offering you a position. Special Operations Training Advisor. You'd develop curriculum, mentor junior officers, consult on logistics integration with operational planning. Full commander pay and benefits. I decline, ma'am, respectfully. May I ask why? Because the warehouse is where I need to be. Keene smiled slightly. What if I made it part-time? 2 days a month advisory role, rest of your time in logistics. Bex considered. I could accept that, as long as I can still wear civilian clothes in my warehouse. Deal. They shook hands. Kowalski cleared his throat. Ma'am, if I may, Commander Harlow, Admiral Patterson trained me in 2007. He taught me that humility and competence aren't opposites. You've lived that lesson better than anyone I've ever met. Thank you, Master Chief. The sun was higher now, warming the pavilion. In the distance, personnel were starting to gather again, word spreading faster than any official announcement could travel. One more thing, Beck said. What happened to my clipboard? 2 weeks later, Commander Trevor Vance stood outside Admiral Keene's office at 07:55 hours. His uniform was impeccable, pressed sharp, shoes polished mirror bright. But his face showed the weight of 14 days spent waiting for judgment. Inside the office, Keene reviewed the investigation report one final time. Article 92, failure to follow established security verification protocols. Article 133, conduct unbecoming an officer and gentleman. The evidence was overwhelming. Witness statements from Kowalski, Morrison, Hutchins, and 17 others. Video footage from multiple phones before they'd been confiscated. Testimony from Carl Webb describing the public humiliation. At 800, Vance was called in. Commander Vance, after thorough investigation, I'm accepting non-judicial punishment under Article 15. You're hereby reprimanded, fined 1 month's pay, and reassigned to Naval Support Facility Diego Garcia, effective in 30 days. You'll serve as Assistant Logistics Officer, a position where you'll learn firsthand the importance of the work you dismissed as beneath notice. Vance's jaw tightened. Diego Garcia, middle of the Indian Ocean, career exile. Do you have anything to say? No, ma'am. Then you're dismissed. Vance walked out of the office and out of Coronado. He never spoke to Bex again. Some people don't learn. Some people don't deserve second chances at leadership. That same morning, Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood in front of 40 junior SEALs in the base auditorium. He'd volunteered for this, teaching a 3-hour block on respect, humility, and leadership failures. 2 weeks ago, he began, voice steady despite obvious discomfort. I made the worst mistake of my career. I publicly mocked and physically intimidated someone I assumed was beneath my notice. I threw a 30-pound ammunition can at her head as a joke. I questioned her integrity and suggested she was incompetent. The room was silent. Everyone had seen the footage before security scrubbed it. That person was Commander Rebecca Harlow, Navy DevGru, 10-year Special Operations, Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts. She served under Admiral Patterson and was there when he died in Syria.
Morrison's voice cracked slightly. And I treated her like garbage because she wore khakis instead of a uniform. He pulled up a slide showing the trident insignia. Here's what I learned. Rank doesn't make you right. A uniform doesn't make you worthy of respect. Character does. Competence does. Sacrifice does. Commander Harlow had all three, and I was too arrogant to see it. A young SEAL in the front row raised his hand. Sir, how do we avoid making the same mistake? You verify before you judge. You treat every person with basic respect regardless of their job. And you remember that the most dangerous operators in the world often look like the least dangerous people in the room. After the presentation, Morrison found Bex in the warehouse. She was inventorying medical supplies, checking expiration dates on trauma kits. He approached slowly, like approaching something wild. Ma'am, permission to speak? You don't need permission, Lieutenant. I do, actually. He pulled something from his pocket, his lieutenant's bars, held them out to her. I don't deserve to wear these, not after what I did. Bex didn't take them. Put your rank back on, Morrison. Ma'am, you made a mistake, a serious one, but you owned it. You're teaching others not to repeat it. That's leadership. She looked at him directly. Admiral Patterson taught me something after I screwed up a mission brief in 2015. He said, "Don't waste a good failure. Learn from it, teach from it, grow from it." Morrison's hand shook as he pinned the bars back on. How do I make this right? You don't. You can't unmake what happened. You just do better going forward. You make sure the next generation of SEALs doesn't judge people by their uniform. You make sure they understand that every job in this military matters. Yes, ma'am. And Morrison, stop calling me ma'am in the warehouse. It's Bex. He smiled slightly, genuine for the first time in 2 weeks. Thank you, Bex. Later that afternoon, Petty Officer Derek Hutchins found Bex on the loading dock. He didn't have a speech prepared, just stood there for 10 seconds before speaking. I'm sorry. Bex looked up from her manifest. I know. No, you don't. Not really. Hutchins sat on a nearby crate, uninvited. I grew up poor, joined the Navy to prove I was somebody, made it through EOD school, got assigned to NSW, thought I'd finally made it, but I'm not a SEAL. I'm support, and I spent 2 years resenting that, trying to prove I belonged by tearing down people I thought were lower than me. He looked at his hands. Turns out the person I was tearing down had done more in one deployment than I'll do in my entire career. That's not true, Bex said. EOD techs save lives every single day. You think I could have done my job in Syria without people like you clearing routes, disabling IEDs, making sure we could move safely? I never thought about it that way. Most people don't. Everyone thinks their job is less important than someone else's. Admiral Patterson used to say the military is a machine. Every part matters. Remove one gear and the whole thing stops. Hutchins stood. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here, and I'm sorry it took me being an idiot to figure that out. Noted. Now help me lift this crate. Medical supplies for Team 7. They deploy in 3 days. They worked in silence for 20 minutes, loading supplies onto a pallet jack. When they finished, Hutchins asked, "What was he like?" Admiral Patterson. Bex was quiet for a moment. Demanding. Fair. He expected excellence, but he never asked for anything he wouldn't do himself. He carried the heaviest pack on every patrol. He ate last after missions. And when things went bad, he put himself between his people and the danger. Is that what happened in Syria? Yes. IED took out our lead vehicle. We were pinned in a kill zone. 50, maybe 60 hostiles with elevated positions and clear fields of fire. We needed 4 minutes for air support to arrive. He gave us those 4 minutes. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were distant. He drew their fire, made himself the primary target, moved position 3 times to keep them focused on him instead of us. When the helo arrived, 5 of us made it to the LZ. He didn't. Hutchins blinked back tears. I'm sorry. Me too. Every single day. That evening, Admiral Keane called an informal formation in the main parade ground. 200 personnel gathered,
SEALs, support staff, administrative personnel, contractors. Word had spread throughout the base about what happened. Everyone wanted to see. Keene took the microphone. 2 weeks ago, something happened on this base that should never have happened. A decorated combat veteran, a Silver Star recipient, a Purple Heart recipient 3 times over, was publicly humiliated because of assumptions about her job and her appearance. The crowd was silent. Beck stood in the back, trying to be invisible. Master Chief Kowalski had physically positioned himself next to her to prevent escape. That veteran is here today. Commander Rebecca Harlow. Keene pointed. Stand up, Commander. That's not a request. Reluctantly, Beck stood. Commander Harlow served 10 years in naval special warfare. She conducted operations in 6 combat zones. She served under Admiral William Patterson and was there when he made his final sacrifice in Syria. Keene's voice carried across the silent formation. She chose to come here after retirement to work logistics, not because she had to, because she wanted to honor her fallen teammates by making sure current operators never face supply shortages in combat. Keene began a slow clap. Kowalski joined immediately. Then Corporal Reeves. Within 5 seconds, 200 people were applauded. Bex's face flushed. She hated this, hated the attention, hated being singled out. But she stood there and accepted it because Keene was right. Sometimes respect had to be public to counterbalance public humiliation. After the formation dispersed, a young female seaman approached. She was 19, barely 5'3", with nervous eyes. "Ma'am, I'm in logistics too. Supply administration."
My recruiter said it was a dead-end job. My family says I should have tried for something better. I've been thinking about requesting a transfer. Bex looked at her name tape. Miller. Seaman Miller, do you know how many operations failed in Iraq and Afghanistan because of logistics problems? Hundreds. Units ran out of ammunition. Medical supplies arrived late. Equipment broke because spare parts weren't available. I didn't know that. Most people don't. They think logistics is paperwork. It's not. It's life and death. It's making sure a SEAL in Ramadi has the ammunition he needs. It's making sure a Marine in Helmand has the medical supplies to save his buddy. It's making sure people like Admiral Patterson have the equipment to complete their missions and come home. Miller's eyes were wide. Did he come home? No, but that wasn't because of logistics. That was because sometimes courage means standing in the fire so others can escape. Bex put a hand on Miller's shoulder. Your job matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And if they do, send them to me. Miller left, standing straighter, something like pride in her posture. Corporal Reeves approached as Miller walked away. Commander, my father called me last night. He heard what happened through the veteran network. He wanted me to give you something. She held out a small wooden coin, a challenge coin from SEAL Team 5, circa 2007, worn smooth from years of handling. He said Admiral Patterson gave him this coin after Ramadi, told him to pass it on to someone who embodied the same values. My father thinks that's you. Bex took the coin with shaking hands. She'd seen Patterson carry this coin, seen him flip it between his fingers during mission briefs when he was thinking. Tell your father thank you, and tell him Patterson would be proud of the Marine you've become. Reeves saluted, unauthorized but heartfelt. Bex returned it. As the sun set over Coronado, Bex returned to her warehouse. The loading dock was empty now, shadows growing long across the concrete. She pulled out the challenge coin, ran her thumb over the trident embossed on one side. Her phone buzzed. Text from Morrison. Teaching another respect course next month. Would you be willing to speak? 10 minutes. Just tell your story. She typed back, send me the details. Another text, this time from Keene. Formal advisory role starts next month. First assignment, review logistics integration for SEAL team deployment packages. Your expertise is needed. Bex smiled slightly. Maybe this was right. Maybe honoring the dead meant helping the living. Maybe Admiral Patterson's legacy wasn't just in the missions he led, but in the people he trained to carry on his values. She locked up the warehouse at 1800 hours, like always. Tomorrow, she'll be back at 0700, counting supplies and checking manifests.
But now, when people saw her, they'd see more than a contractor in khakis. They'd see what she'd always been, a warrior who never stopped serving. 3 months later, at 07:15 hours, Beck stood in her warehouse checking a manifest when Admiral Keene walked in unannounced. She carried a folder stamped with classification markings. "Morning, Admiral." "Morning, Bex. Got a minute?" They walked to the small office in the back. Keene closed the door and set the folder on the desk. "I'm here to make this official. Special Operations Training Advisor position. 2 days a month, full commander pay, benefits, and your warehouse stays yours the rest of the time." "I already agreed, ma'am." "I know, but there's something else." Keene opened the folder. SEAL Team 7 deploys to an undisclosed location in 6 weeks. Their logistics package has critical gaps, same type of gaps that contributed to Operation Sandstone. Beck's expression hardened. "What kind of gaps?" "Anti-armor capabilities insufficient for expected threat environment. Medical supplies don't account for extended operations beyond initial 72 hours. Ammunition loads are based on outdated intelligence about enemy force size." "Who approved this package?" "Commander Vance, 3 months ago, before he was relieved." Bex was quiet for 5 seconds. "He was trying to cut costs. I saw the emails. He reduced AT4 allocations by 30% across all teams." "Can you fix it?" "Yes, ma'am, but I'll need direct access to the team leadership and 72 hours. You have both. And Bex, thank you for still caring enough to do this." After Keene left, Bex pulled up the deployment logistics file, spent 4 hours reviewing every line item, cross-referencing with intelligence reports, building a revised package that actually matched the mission requirements. When she finished, she'd increased the logistics load by 40% and cut the total cost by 15%. Smarter sourcing. She sent the package to SEAL Team 7's commanding officer with a note, "Review and advise. I'll brief your team on Thursday if you want details." Thursday came. She stood in front of 20 SEALs in their team room wearing civilian clothes as always. But now when she walked in, they stood. Not at attention, she told them not to, but out of respect. "Gentlemen, your current logistics package will get people killed. Here's why." She spent 90 minutes walking them through threat assessments, historical ammunition consumption rates in similar environments, medical supply requirements based on expected casualty rates. She didn't sugarcoat anything. A young SEAL, couldn't have been older than 26, raised his hand. "Ma'am, how do you know enemy force sizes? That intelligence is classified." "Because I helped write similar intelligence assessments for 6 years, and because the enemy doesn't change tactics as fast as we think they do." Another SEAL, older, with the weathered look of multiple deployments, "This is the first time anyone's explained logistics like it actually matters to the mission." "It's the only thing that matters," Beck said. "Tactics, training, courage, all meaningless if you run out of ammunition in hour 3 of a 12-hour firefight." The Team 7 commander stood. "Commander Harlow, we're implementing every change you recommended, and I'm requesting you do this brief for every team before deployment from now on." "I'll make time." That evening, Beck sat in a VA counseling session. She'd been going weekly since the incident at the range, since being exposed had brought everything back to the surface. Her therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, asked the same question she asked every week. "How are you managing?" "Better, worse, both." Bex looked at our hands. "Having people know who I was, it's validating and terrifying. Part of me feels seen for the first time in 5 years. Part of me wants to disappear again." "That's normal. You built an identity around being invisible. Now that's gone." "I'm teaching next week, junior intelligence officers. Admiral Keene asked me to talk about integrating intelligence with operations planning." "How do you feel about that?" "Like I'm useful again. Like maybe Patterson's death wasn't for nothing if I can keep other teams from making the same mistakes we made." Dr. Kim nodded. "You've mentioned him every session for 3 months. Tell me something about him you haven't shared before." Bex was quiet for a long time. "He couldn't sing, absolutely tone deaf. But on every deployment, he'd sing this old country song, The Gambler by Kenny Rogers, before missions. Drove everyone crazy, but we loved it because it meant he was loose, confident. If Patterson was singing, the mission was going to be okay." "What happened the last time?" "He didn't sing. We rolled out in silence. I should have known something was wrong. Bex, you can't predict IEDs based on someone not singing. I know, but I think he knew. I think he felt it. They sat in silence for a while. One more thing, Dr. Kim said. You're sleeping better? 4 hours most nights now, up from 2. Nightmares? Still there, but less frequent. That's progress. At 0300 hours that night, Bex woke from the dream she always had. The one where the IED goes off in slow motion, where she sees Patterson move to draw fire, where she screams for him to get down, but no sound comes out. She got up, made coffee, didn't try to go back to sleep. The walls of her apartment held the things she'd saved from 10 years of service. Photos of her team, medals in a drawer she never opened, a folded flag from Patterson's funeral. There was a new addition now, the challenge coin from Corporal Reeves' father. She picked it up, held it to the light. Her phone buzzed. Text from Morrison, can't sleep either. Range opens at 0500 if you want to shoot. She smiled. Typed back, see you there. At 0500, they shot side by side in comfortable silence. Morrison had gotten better, his groupings tighter, his transitions smoother. He was learning. I'm putting together a training program, he said between magazines, teaching junior guys about respect, humility, not judging people by their job titles. Admiral Keene approved it as mandatory for all new personnel. That's good. I'm calling it the Patterson Protocol. Figured he should be remembered for teaching the right lessons. Bex lowered her rifle. He'd like that. They shot until sunrise, then walked back to the base together as the morning light turned everything gold. At 7:30, Bex opened her warehouse. Same routine as always. Check overnight deliveries, verify manifests, update inventory systems. But now, 3 junior logistics personnel arrived to help. Seaman Miller was one of them.
Morning, Commander. It's still Bex in this warehouse, Miller. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Bex. They worked through the morning, training the junior personnel on proper inventory procedures, teaching them how to read supply patterns, how to anticipate needs before teams requested them. At 1100, Master Chief Kowalski stopped by with coffee. Heard you briefed Team 7 yesterday. They're calling it the best pre-deployment logistics brief they've ever received. It's just common sense. No, it's expertise. There's a difference. He handed her a coffee, black, the way she liked it. Also heard you're teaching at the intelligence course next week. 2-hour block on operational integration. Patterson would be proud. You're doing exactly what he trained you to do, teaching the next generation. I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. Kowalski left, and Bex returned to her manifests. But something felt different now. Lighter, maybe. Like she'd been carrying a weight for 5 years and finally set part of it down. At 1400, a call came through from Admiral Keene. Bex, got something for you. JSOC is requesting you consult on a logistics review for a classified operation. They want your assessment of supply chain vulnerabilities. 2 weeks, all expenses paid, travel to Fort Bragg. What's the operation? Can't say over this line. But it's the kind of thing Patterson would have run if he were still here. Bex looked around her warehouse, the pallets of supplies, the manifest sheets, the inventory system she'd built from scratch. This place had saved her, given her purpose when she thought she had none left. But maybe there was more she could do. Maybe honoring Patterson meant more than counting boxes. I'll do it. Excellent. Briefing packet arrives Monday. That evening, as sunset painted the warehouse in orange light, Bex stood in the loading dock doorway. She pulled out Patterson's challenge coin, ran her thumb over the trident one more time. Her voice was quiet, meant for no one but herself and a ghost 5 years gone. I'm still here, Bull. Still fighting. Still making sure your guys have what they need. And I'm teaching them the way you taught me, that every job matters, every person matters, and leadership is about service, not status. The wind off the ocean carried the salt smell she'd grown to love. Somewhere on base, a formation was being called. Young sailors and Marines learning what it meant to serve. She tucked the coin back in her pocket and returned to her desk. There was a shipment arriving at 1800 hours. Medical supplies for 3 teams, ammunition for 2 more, and a classified equipment package she'd need to verify personally. The work never stopped,
And that was exactly how she wanted it. In 10 years of operations, Bex had learned that heroism wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was counting supplies in a warehouse, making sure the next generation didn't run out of ammunition when it mattered most. Sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons at all. Her computer chimed. Email from Lieutenant Morrison. Patterson protocol approved. First class starts next month. 47 personnel enrolled. We're making it mandatory for all O3 and below. Thank you for the second chance. She typed back, you earned it. Now pay it forward. Another email, this one from Seaman Miller. Just wanted to say thank you. I requested a transfer last month. My chief talked me out of it after hearing about you. I'm staying in logistics. Going to make a career of it. Bex smiled and closed her laptop. Outside, the base was settling into evening routine. Somewhere, SEALs were training. Somewhere, Marines were preparing for deployment. Somewhere, young sailors were learning that their jobs mattered, that they mattered, regardless of what uniform they wore or what title they held. And in a small warehouse in Coronado, a woman with burn scars and a limp counted supplies with the same precision she'd once used to plan combat operations. Because some missions never end. Because some promises are kept forever. Because Admiral William Bull Patterson had taught her that service doesn't stop when the uniform comes off, it just changes form. She locked the warehouse at 1830 hours, clipboard secured properly in her hand, and walked into the California twilight, ready for whatever came next. If you've ever been underestimated because of how you looked, what job you held, or what people assumed about you, drop your story in the comments below. And remember, respect isn't given because of rank or title. It's earned through character, competence, and the quiet courage to do what's right, even when no one's watching. Commander Rebecca Harlow understood that better than anyone, and she was just getting started.